Okay, so I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Sarah Andrus. Sarah has got a really fascinating background, and she's been on every side of the hiring equation, is the way she describes it. And I'd love you to go and look at her bio and background, and you'll see what a vast experience, rich experience she's got. She's the founder of Avara Careers, and she's also the assistant director at the Lerner College of Business at the University of Delaware. So she's working with a wide range of people and has truly spent her own career immersed in everybody else's careers. And so today she's going to share some advice on how to find clarity as a career switcher, changer, and talk about some of the things that you may find useful as you go on your journey. So I'm going to hand you over to Sarah, who's going to give you a little bit more information about her background in the first instance. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you so much, Denise. I'm delighted to be here and to share some thoughts with your listeners about how to handle this situation when we aren't really sure what our next step is, but we know that something else is out there for us. And perhaps by way of background, I can share a bit about my own transition when I've had to make these career decisions. And as you mentioned in your very kind intro, I have spent my career immersed in everybody else's careers. And that began really doing career coaching at university. And I happen to have been very lucky working with adult students who were returning back for education to make a change. And so most of the people I was working with were considerably older than I was. And that was so inspiring. And it set me up really nicely to look at a career not as a decision, but as an evolution. And as I saw these people making dramatic changes in their lives, often not voluntarily. These could be single mothers, these could be veterans who were out of the military, or people who were laid off. And change happens, and we need to adapt. But I was so fortunate to get that vision early that we can adapt, and to have so many great role models of that in my own life. So working with adult students who were making change was just a gift to me, because I got to see that a career isn't just one decision, it's really an evolution, and we can make changes. And so with that as my model, there I was as a young person working in academia. And I got this little itch, as many of us do, that I think there might be something else out there for me. And because I'd had these excellent role models in my own adult students, I thought, well, where would I go? And I began to consider what might be a good fit. And I decided to move into the recruiting space, into corporate recruiting. And that seemed to be somewhere where I could take these skills I had and apply them. And I was really fortunate that the company I went to work for, their priority was getting somebody who understood academia, because they were challenged by their campus recruiting efforts. So I had this marvelous opportunity to really build a campus recruiting program from scratch. Fantastic. And that expanded.
Wow,
yes.
That is, what a lovely match of skills and background that must have been. Joyous.
It was. And I had a chance also to grow this program, so that it started out as just me and going out to different universities and seeing what was what out there, and working with the management team to help them understand what good recruiting practices looked like, and then develop and institutionalize a positive recruiting culture, and build my own team ultimately. And then over time, as long as I was advancing and learning new things, I found I was really happy and content with that organization. And at some point, probably 15 years in, I thought, I'm not sure I'm advancing anymore. And I'm not sure where I can go next. I had become one of the most senior women in the organization. It was also a family, not entirely family owned, but primarily family owned business, privately held company. And I began to think, could I be doing more? Could I be earning more? What else could I be doing? And if there's anything that I've discovered, it's that when we begin to get that itch, our instinct is to ignore it. And the reason for that is multitudes. But what I think many people will recognize, perhaps in themselves, is the idea that there's a trigger. Like somebody gets a promotion you didn't get, or you hear that somebody else got a raise, or you see your friends and family perhaps making changes or new decisions. There's a trigger that gives you that itch. And we might take quick action on the trigger. And these days, that tends to be just go online and do what I call spray and pray, which is apply for everything you see and cross your fingers. But as you know, that is not the way to find a job. Because where that leaves us, following this pattern, first there's a trigger, then we get energy and excitement, we take action. But we take the wrong action because we put ourselves in a position of passively waiting for people to say, yes, I'd like to talk to you. Yes, I'd like to interview you. And instead, what happens is we get nothing. We hear dead silence, and all those applications go into this deep, dark hole of cyberspace. And by the way, if you think that a human has never actually seen your resume, you're probably right, because that is the nature of these online job boards. It's not the numbers game you think it is. So, for example, you might put out hundreds of applications, and I've had clients who come to work with me and they'll say, I applied for more than 300 jobs. I must be doing something wrong. And I say, yes, applying for 300 jobs.
I think like when we've spoken before, I think, that when I first started recruiting, I've been recruiting since 1999, or maybe 97 even, but 99 is when I moved into senior recruitment. And in those days, the quality of the applications that I received was very high. And yes. I did look at every application. And that's because people had to find the role they wanted to apply for, usually by local press or the Sunday papers. And then they'd have to type their CV, computers weren't really that advanced at that point. Some people had them, and then they had to walk to a post box and they put it on nice paper and they wrote a lovely covering letter and they put a stamp on it, and then we replied by post. And I, truly, I mean, yes, you still as a recruiter go through the yes, no, maybe cycle of those applications coming in, but it did mean as well that you had time. I found that you could say to the no's, this was the reason. And I think that's a very frustrating thing for people with the online applications, is that they don't get any feedback.
Well, precisely, you have nailed it. So we don't get feedback. And then the next step in the pattern is our brain fills in the gap, and our brain is usually wrong. So we go into a fear and negativity space where, well, I must not have been qualified, or maybe there's something wrong with my resume, or perhaps I'm applying for the wrong jobs, or maybe my skills are stale. And we begin to enter that self-doubt because we're buying into the brain's, really good effort to try to fill in the gap of what happened here. We have a natural instinct to try to explain why there's no interaction, why there's no feedback. But once that fear sets in, then we stall and we don't continue because there's nothing encouraging us to do so. And we stall until something triggers us again. So often people will come to me and say, Sarah, I have started this job search 3 times over the last 5 years, and something always stops me. So, what I like to recommend to people is that rather than uh, following this pattern, I think we need to intercede at that energy stage and make sure that the actions we take when we feel the trigger are the proper actions that are going to get us some results. Now, that doesn't mean it's the right time to change jobs. It doesn't mean, that uh, you're being forced into making a decision, because people get concerned, and some legitimate worries may pop up, like, oh, what will a job change mean for my family? Or maybe I'll get, through the interview process, but I won't get the job, and then I'll feel terrible. And so we tend to anticipate the most negative possible outcome. And again, those fears are always, they're deserving of thorough evaluation. So when I decided to leave a company after a very long time, it had been, by the time I left and went through that cycle numerous times, it had been more than 20 years. And I really I worked with a career coach at that time, and I worked on what was next. And when I made that change finally, there were a few missteps I took, even as a career coach, even as somebody who had been absolutely immersed in the recruiting process, even as somebody who had been a hiring manager and been through this process countless times. I made a few missteps in my own process because at that point I was so anxious to make a change. So that's another disadvantage of waiting too long, is that then you might jump. And that's precisely what I did. And that next job was not a great fit for me. And ultimately, 18 months later, the company announced a layoff, and I could not have been happier. I was delighted. It was a little bit of an ouch, which I think we all wonder why us, and I understand. But it enabled me to really go back to this process that I offer all of my clients, which is starting with ourselves, not to start with what's out there, but to begin with what's in here, and look at those times when we have been happiest in our work. Look at those projects that have really given us energy. Look at the achievements that we're very proud of, and then identify the specific skills and traits that led to the success of that effort. And by the way, this can be done for the smallest of things, and it can be done for personal as well as professional achievements. The key is to really tease out the skills and traits that light us up, and then to look at them universally and say, okay, of all those skills that help me be successful in that achievement, whatever it might be, which of those do I really enjoy? Which of those am I good at? And let's be honest, a lot of us are good at things we don't love. So this, I'll take you through a concrete example. I was working with a client around this very exercise, and I call it your best self. And what the goal is to identify a minimum of 3, but ideally 5 to 7 achievements, things that we've done. It could be anything from baking a cake that was delicious to winning an award for a project at work. And we were walking through this high point achievement of hers. This was a situation where she had been working in a manager of a customer service role department. And, when you're in that kind of a role and you've got 25 people reporting to you, and she had peers too. So she wasn't the only one leading this effort. You just begin to notice patterns, which she had done. And she noticed that the people on her team who had just come out of training were having a particular problem with a change in policy that had been made. And she thought, I don't know that we're training to this. All right. So then she began to consider, all right, well, what would be the solution here? And she thought, it's written up in a manual, but we don't have a video reviewing how to handle this particular inquiry from our customers. And she knew that videos were the very most effective way of training her team. And so she began to consider, well, what would that look like and how might I do it? And she talked to her boss, and her boss immediately said, not going to happen. Stay in your lane. That's training's department. Well, she was not content with that response. And so she gathered the other team leaders and said, are you guys seeing what I'm seeing? What do you think of this idea I have? And together they went to training, and they brought the question to the training team, and they said, what do you think about us making a video that addresses this more clearly? Training team was all about it. So then they all went back to the manager and said, we've been talking about this, and we talked to training about it, and they think they can get this done, but they want our engagement. At which point, of course, the manager agreed that this was a good idea. So as she's conveying the story to me, I'm pulling out the skills and the traits. Now, skills are what we do, and traits are who we are. And they're both important in job fit. So I heard problem solving. I heard observational skills. I heard persuasiveness, persistence, team collaboration, using one's resources. I heard she was actually involved in the development of the video. So she also had the video and digital skills. She had the script writing skills. She had the training skills herself. And we talked about, okay, which of these things are really exciting and which of these things were somewhat drudgery for you? And by pulling those things out, we're able to get to what she might be looking for in her next role. So when I ask myself the question of, or I get the question from a client of, well, I know I need to make a change, but I don't know what the next best fit is. Doing some of these high point stories and looking at the skills and the traits that you demonstrate in those stories, well, these are going to lead you in the right direction for what's next. And equally as important, you're going to get real clarity on how to handle it when you're good at something but you don't love it, because it's very natural to want to go into something that is comfortable for it. You do it well. It would be a good transition. And that was candidly the mistake that I made when I made that change, going from a company I've been with for a long time into this next organization, was that what really made me great in my role in that first organization and able to grow there and make a meaningful contribution, I wasn't going to be able to do in this new role. And the new role had lots of stuff I was good at but hated. And so that was just an incredible learning experience to me. And I immediately knew, I say within several weeks, that I had made a misstep. And I began to think about what's next. And that's when I built my business plan for Barra Careers, because I knew that if somebody with my skills and background and everything I know about hiring and recruiting, if I could make that kind of mistake, other people needed my help. And I didn't want anybody to make that mistake. So I built this business around helping people gain that clarity. What's going to be the best next step? Also gain clarity that this isn't a forever decision. We get so anxious about job change because it feels monumental. And the reason it feels monumental is the reason it feels monumental is that we tell ourselves, "Oh, this is going to make or break me." And that's just not true. We know that in today's economy, people are changing jobs every several years. And it's not even job hopping is not even a thing anymore. In fact, in many industries, if you have not made a change, that's considered a detriment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really relate to what you're talking about in terms of identifying, your skills, your values, all those pieces in advance, and that's very much the way I work. I always talk about it as like a 3-lane highway. You've got this 3 sets of things that you look at, in that you've got the safe lane, the inside lane, that's the skills that you could use whatever job you were doing. It doesn't really matter, because they're innate. You're a good organizer, you're a good leader. They're just there. And then you've got that central lane. They're things you can do but you don't really like. So you need a role that's going to either surround you with people who love that, and you can lead and guide them using your leadership skills, but you don't have to do it. And then I love that outside lane piece, which is the part that is going really fast and you're learning, and you can feel your nails going down the blackboard because it's so sort of like a little bit scary, but that's what's filling you up. And I've always had that analogy in my head that if you can hit all 3 lanes, you've probably got the right job and you're in the right team. So I so relate to what you're talking about.
I
So
love
when
that
they
imagery.
I
That
do.
is great imagery. Thank you for that.
Yeah. When so they've gone through the process, and they've they know where they're going, and they know what sort of roles they're applying for. When people start to go for interview and meet people, and they start to get those killer questions that most of us can struggle on, even though we know they're coming, that very simple question is, tell me about yourself. How do you sort of coach and guide people around those sort of parts of the process?
Mm. Well, the good news is that this very same high point exercise can give you the language for your answer to that question. And what I really recommend is that you plan a question and a response to the question that you kind of know inside out and backwards, but you can tweak it depending on the situation. Because the tell me about yourself could be a straightforward tell me about yourself, or it could be walk us through your resume, or it could be why do you want to work here? Whatever that first question is out of the box in an interview or in a networking situation, even, your response can really be the same. And the biggest mistake I see people make with this is that they begin in a rote fashion. Oh, my name is Sarah. I'm from Wilmington, Delaware, and I'm bored already. So, what I recommend instead is that we begin with a defining statement. And you actually quoted my defining statement when we opened our conversation today. You said, I've spent my entire career immersed in everybody else's careers. That is my defining statement. That's how I open any answer to this type of question. And each of us has our own. So a defining statement, if you're in marketing, could be something like, since it became a thing, I've just fallen in love with social media. And at first it was all about me, but then I became fascinated by how brands use messages to make sales. That would be a good marketing defining statement. If you are in something related to technology or computer science or business analytics, a great defining statement might be, for as long as I can remember, people started telling me I was really good at math. And then, as I advanced and went through school, I found I also really enjoyed math, but I more enjoyed the application of those mathematical skills to real world problems. And that's what led me to the study of data science and business analytics, because I just love the idea of being part of how businesses make decisions every day. So you can take the simplest thing and make it your defining statement. It can just be something about you that sets you apart in some way. And then you follow that with, that's what led me to do X. So that's what led me to study marketing in college, or that's what led me to my first role in information sciences. And I was really fortunate to get A, B, and C experience in that role. And what I discovered was, and then we add, so we begin with a defining statement, we follow with some early career steps, and then we add whatever is relevant to this job we're looking at. And what I discovered was I'm really good at, or what I discovered was people told me I was really good at this and this. And so then you're not bragging, you're putting it in somebody else's mouth. You know, I was told repeatedly as I would get performance reviews that people really appreciated my project management experience. And I love that work. And that's one of the things. And then you go to the wrap. That's one of the things that interested me in this role, was the opportunity to use both my marketing and social media experience as well as my project management skills. And then the next part is key, the pivot to them to let them know you're done. And I'm really happy to be here and eager to hear about what you're looking for in a candidate.
I really love that. I love the structure of the way you've put that together.
And once you have a structure,
mm.
it becomes so much easier. The biggest mistake I see people making is they don't pivot at the end. They tail off with something like, so yeah, which gives away all your power.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because as a recruiter, as you and I know, so often when, you know, you have that question, and my favorite question was not tell me about yourself, it's tell me something about yourself that's not on your CV. And that can really throw people, you know, quite badly if they haven't thought about themselves as an individual. Because I want to know about the person as well. I don't just want to know about their background. I want to know about the whole person. But I think, you know, so often, and I'm sure you've seen it many times, they just start to regurgitate their CV and their background. And as a recruiter, you're bored and you're holding your hand up 10 minutes in and saying, I'm going to have to stop you there, you know, because you're taking away your valuable interview time. Whereas if you use the structure that you've just talked about, you've added to the value of your time there. So that's really powerful.
I want to speak to what you just said about your question, which I love. Tell me something that's not on your CV, or tell me something that's not on your resume. That's the beauty of doing these high point stories as well, because if you've got these stories in your back pocket, you probably have written a personal one, or I hope you've written one that's personal, and that you could begin with. And you could say, well, I actually love baking. In fact, baking has really helped me develop some of the skills that I think would be really helpful in this role. And then you can go to your story. I was baking a cake for my friend at New Year's Eve, and I had to use budgeting skills because I didn't want to, you know, spend the bank as I was planning something special. And I had to use my attention to detail, and I had to research the right recipe. So these high point stories are useful in preparation for any question that you might be asked in the interview. Tell me about a time when you had a conflict with somebody. Tell me about a time when you had to make an independent decision. If you've prepared these stories, you will surely be better prepared to answer those questions.
Yeah. That is also very helpful. Really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of that, Sarah. It's I've really enjoyed talking to you. So tell me, I know that you're going to leave something with us that people can sign up for and get, that they
Yes.
can connect with you afterwards. Can you just give us a little bit more information about what you're
I would
sharing?
love to. Absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity. So, what I'm sharing is actually a PDF of this exercise I've just described that will walk us through step by step how to identify the stories, how to pull out your skills, how to understand what it is that you like versus you're good at and don't like, how to tease all that out. So I have a whole PDF that's going to walk people step by step through that process so that they will have their stories for any situation.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. And all your contact details and everything will be on there and people can get in touch.
Absolutely. Yes, I
Fantastic.
welcome the chance to speak with anybody who thinks they could use some assistance in going through this. But I've designed it so that you should be able to go through it on your own.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And
It's
I'm
been
sure
my
this will
pleasure, Denise. Thanks for the opportunity.